Okay, so still with my new phone, I don't know how my camera is going to do because uh, the last three times I tried, the results were not great. So every time I change a little something to see if it works out. But yeah, let's wait and see. But yeah, so today has been a very productive day for me. Yesterday was also kind of unproductive. But I was out, I was doing stuff, so it didn't really feel as unproductive as today, which is why I ended up kind of taking time. Okay, I'm gonna kind of get everything out of my head right now so that I have a good shot at the rest of the time I have before the evening and we're gonna go out. So yeah, I'm kind of okay, I'm gonna get everything out because maybe this is going to help me. But I do find that the most preoccupying thing about me not really being able to do anything is it's why, because I've been kind of detached from the story, because and that kind of gets in the way of me developing it and for me trying to work on it, because my head I want to do something else. I want to I've been rereading some manga from way back in the day. There is this website, it's called Mangago, and I had an account for many years in the past. And recently, I don't know, I saw some stuff and I started reading some new things, which is good, reading, that's a positive development, in my life. But usually I do it to kind of distract me, when I feel because usually reading stories of any kind, usually gets me inspired one way or another. And they're not really doing that anymore. That's kind of the thing. Although I will say, I finished reading this manga. I will not remember the names because I mean some mangas, some manhwas, they have an English name or another language, but some of them are very much in Japanese or Korean or Chinese. Yeah, so and also as I said, I'm more of a visual person, so I remember the thing less for the name but more for the cover image that you have. So that's kind of how I identify things. But yeah, so I've been doing some reading, and that's good. That as I said, consuming stories can be very helpful, and that is also my plan for today. I've kind of rereading my old novels, my old manuscripts, because I don't know, I find them, it's a really good feeling for me to be able to read it, see the book in person and read it is really fun. But also it kind of sometimes it works in terms of inspiration, because I see something from this book that I have kind of develop in this one, and so that is also kind of helpful. Also with this whole thing of lacking concentration and having too much energy to sleep, I did contact my doctor and we scheduled an appointment for I think it was March 10th. So there's a little over for me, yeah, a week and a little bit more, yeah, not even 2 weeks till I kind of have this session. And we're gonna see if we're gonna change the medication, how it's going to be Also, I have a consultation with my general physician on the 9th, so it's going to be 2 days back to back with me kind of having health appointments, which is really important. I also have to kind of schedule an appointment with my endocrinologist. Usually he prescribes me some these pills, and I still have them, because my mom and I were both taking them, so we kind of bought the double the quantity. And my mom stopped taking them, so now I've had this last batch just for myself. But yeah, so I kind of I know it's not that I'm letting myself go, because I'm still kind of putting in the effort to improve myself physically and mentally. But I've been so involved in my novel that I'm just really, I don't want to really do anything else, and that's the best feeling. This is the feeling I want to get back to, because as I said, I am currently struggling a little bit. For today so far, I haven't really been able to get I probably got one paragraph, if all that. So I am, looking forward to getting back to, a good mental state where I can just, function as a productive member of society. But yeah, but something I wanted to talk about regarding, oh, by the way, my classes are starting next week. So next, March 2nd, I'm going to start my new degree. So that is kind of exciting. I already have, my chronogram of what classes I'm gonna take. I don't know which is the building, because the campus where I'm going to is pretty extensive, which don't make sense. They have faculty for everything. But yeah, so it's going to start and I am excited, and seeing what I'm going to be kind of learning, it feels very doable, for me. It feels like something that I can actually get through and that I'll be interested in, because that's ultimately, the thing for me, because I'm trying to find, like a major, some course that like I'm very interested in, and I don't really have I don't know, because there were things that I wanted to study before, but then I tried them and I realized that they're not for me. So I'm kind of like, and then going through a new journey. But yeah, so I'm excited. That's going to change. I'm going to change my routine because I'm going to have class every evening, which means that also there's still like some things that we have to figure out, because class starts at 7, but like my Zumba class, it finishes at 7. So I'll probably end up arriving a little bit later every week. Every day, because I have 2 Zumba classes, per week. But what I wanted to talk about, that kind of like something that was like that was in my mind, that I was kind of like going back to it, is that this memory that I have from when I was probably like in 6th grade, and I went out with some friends, after school, and like we were going to, there'll be a sleepover, so we were kind of like in this event. Not, it was kind of like a home fair. It wasn't anything like too kind of like out there, but I do remember it was kind of a party. Like there was music, there was food, there were drinks, and all that. And I remember that I was filled with such dread. Like I was out of nowhere. At least it feels to me like I was nowhere, but like I want to explore this, to see what is kind of like the case, because I remember I was very affected out of nowhere, and I started crying, and I was very desperate almost, to the point that people were kind of like, they came to talk to me like, what's happening, and I had to come up with something, just like a really bad excuse. So I just said that I was kind of like worried that my mom was gonna die. I had like this feeling. I don't really believe in feelings, in sensations, when it comes to like the supernatural, and I was also like not a believer back then, but it was something that kind of like I don't know, I think it was somewhat believable, I guess. But I do remember this, and it was such an interesting experience, because I said this and everybody was trying to calm me down, saying that like my mom would be okay. Some people were kind of like annoyed, because the feeling didn't go away. It was kind of like, I said, it was dread, and I felt like so completely alone in the world, which is kind of crazy because I was surrounded by friends, but I had a feeling, and then it kind of like got me thinking, like, why is that I feel this way? Did I feel like seeing that made me feel inadequate? There was something wrong with me, and I don't know, because I have generally, like, with this group of friends that I have, like, I have mostly positive experiences. I in the negative experiences I had were not directly related, to them. It was more like that time of your life, and things that happen, and you were kind of like unsure, and you might be insecure. So there's that. But basically, what I'm trying to say is that came to mind, and there was also, something else. I don't know if it was in the same, day, but I do remember that, it was me plus my friends and, my friend's friends, and we were kind of like walking down the street of my, like the friend where we have just the sleep over at, and like this man, he stopped by us, a bunch of 13, 14-year-olds, and he flashed us, like that was a whole thing. And I don't know, I'm wondering, like, did that have more of an effect that I'm kind of like anticipating? Because whenever I'm thinking about sexual assault and all that, I'm thinking of like the more dramatic situations I had experienced, that they were more kind of like not cliche, like that's the wrong word, but like they were more stereotypical what I expect, like sexual assault should be like. And this is something that is on my mind, because yesterday I had it's not that my libido was low, it's just that I've been mostly okay with myself, so I haven't really gone out and met people and all that. And yesterday I had like a little situation, and then I started thinking about me and my sex life, and kind of like where I am at today, where I was at in the past, about my traumas. And I think that maybe this came to mind because I have like a bunch of like these situations that like you kind of like you see them as being so normal that you kind of forget that some of these things, they should not happen. Like people should not expose themselves to teenagers, people shouldn't say some things in front of children, that type of stuff. And so maybe like this is the connection that happened, but it kind of like it got me thinking, because unfortunately for me, I cannot separate my sex life and my desires or whatever from trauma, because as I mentioned before, like my whole introduction was assault when I was 13, so that was that was bad. and things. So like both like me pushing this topic away and then kind of like getting hyper fixated and like doing more things or whatever, like all those things are connected with what I experienced. And basically like the main one, it's kind of, even to this day I feel kind of like icky about saying like no, I was raped, because I don't know, I don't think it's the same case for when I was younger, where I thought that it made me look and feel weak when I said that. Like right now I don't, I feel that like me standing today is a testament of my strength, that I was able to kind of like interact with the world after that in a healthy way. So there's that. But it was something that I was thinking about, like this little we call them like microaggressions and all that, and how like they made me look at things, because I had a very transactional approach when I was younger. First that was, I shut down completely to any interaction, trying to touch, like that was like I just pretty, which didn't make sense. So there was like almost this repulse, which is something that like the years ended up kind of like mending. But when I first had there's a fly right there, and we bought one of those electric, things that kind of like burn them, but it's not here. And also like so far my dad yesterday, he pretty much told me that I was not supposed to just go around with the racket like going back and forth. You had to wait for like the fire to stop at a surface and then you go. Although like if I do this with the electric one, I'm probably gonna break it, so I'll be gentler. But we did have one of those that those plastic things that but like they are not, I never succeeded at kind of like getting anything from that. But back to what I was saying, so it's kind of like impossible for me to kind of like look at things kind of like separate from my trauma. But what I will say is that yesterday I was very like, okay, I feel like I'm finally free. I was able to be free in a way that I couldn't before, because I was talking about the other day about this whole thing of like me wanting to be kind of like a dominant force in all the environments I was in, because of like insecurities and fears that I had. And it sometimes like got in the way of like me enjoying myself properly, like, and I think I was getting to a point where like, but it felt like it was on a decrease, like like I was the amount of like me feeling that way was decreasing. And then recently, the past couple months maybe, like it went back up, and that's not good, because I just want to be myself basically. I and whatever, I don't want to define who I am to then act like it. I just want to act like something and then define who I am based on how I'm acting, and of course when I say how I'm acting, I mean like in a healthy way, like with no like mechanisms, no deflection, no rationalizations, no projections, no nothing, just me free. And this is, I don't know, I feel like that is kind of like where I don't know, but as I was saying, like this experience that I had, it really allowed me to kind of like look at myself and feel like, oh my god, I've come a long way, like it's not, and like it was mostly like a mental change, like nothing happened, but like it's just me thinking about what could have happened, like it got me like, oh my god, I'm kind of free right now. I can just do this for the sake of pleasure, which is kind of like how it should go, not because I'm trying to prefer myself, and that is a way for me to do that. So yeah, also like it kind of like it put some things into perspective for me. What I mean by that is that it made me realize that like, oh, when I'm living my life, I don't really care about these pretenses. I don't really care about how I am seen. I just wanna, I wanna be I was just in the present, and I was thinking about it. So that was pretty cool for me. I was really happy about that development. But yeah, so basically, my life, it's not ideal. The writing part is not ideal. I'm still struggling with it, but everything else, it feels like I'm growing every day. It's like a new, it's a little journey that I go through, and during that I can kind of like become more myself, and have less, affectations, because that's the greatest risk, like you're trying to be something, like I don't want to, as I said, like I there's a whole like I think therefore I am, but what I want to be is closer to like I am therefore I think, I guess, I don't know if that works, but it's just that I want to be in the present, and I want to enjoy the present. I don't want to kind of like get lost in the past or in the future, or also like not in the parallel past present, because they have these fantasies and they kind of like all come here in Earth like a price, you know, to kind of like living in those fantasies. So I don't want that anymore. I want to be stable. I want to be healthy, and I want to find balance, you know, like in every possible area of my life. I think that I already found it, like in a lot of like different, you know, things that I'm doing. You know, I think that, for example, school wise, I think that you know, like that is going to be an interesting experience for me, and that I will at the end of the day, like I will be able to maybe graduate, or I don't know, maybe I'll find that this is yet another thing that I don't want to study, but I don't, but you know, like it's everything you go through, like that is an experience, and the experiences, they make, you know, life worth living. So I want to, you know, be open-minded, you know, and I want to try, you know, it's not that I didn't try in the past, but I know it's not, maybe not try harder, try smarter, as people say, because I feel like sometimes I in the past, like I was really pushing, you know, towards something, but like that was not the best approach for, you know, what I wanted to do, what I, you know, would be doing, but basically, yeah, like I want this, and I want to try smarter. I want to find my strengths, you know, find like the points where I can improve, and you know how I can use my own tools to improve that, because that's usually the best way to go about things. You know, like the tools they have already tried, you know, already tested, and they work great. So that is kind of where I am at. But yeah, but I do want to go back to the feeling that I was talking about, you know, when I was with my friends, and I felt so alone and exposed. And no, that's not the word, exposed. Cause I'm still thinking, like I remember the feeling. I don't remember it as in like I'm re-experiencing it, but I do. Yeah, like I'm not re-experiencing anything, but it's still, you know, like I remember, you know, like because it felt odd and very sharp, you know, like it was this moment where I guess I felt very disconnected. And I don't think that that is the only time that had happened, but I think it was one of the times that it happened when I was surrounded by people, because I think that I had a tendency of just like lock myself into myself, and try to like push people away, and find it kind of like experience things, you know, in secret. I think that that is, you know, when I was in seventh grade, you know, it was a semester after I had that, you know, traumatic experience, and basically uh I started, you know, fainting, you know, like I had this today, you know, like these days we know that it's probably like a psychological thing. That's pretty much why I was being so affected. I was affected because, you know, I just checked everything physical and there was nothing. And now I understand, like, it has to do with like that trauma. And when I was right, I still feel uncomfortable saying it. But yeah, so I do remember, you know, like this moment. I lost my train of thought. I do have a situation that kind of happened when I was in high school, you know, in my second year of high school. And it was very interesting because I was kind of like overwhelmed with like a sadness too, and I didn't understand what was happening, which, you know, makes sense. You know, to this day, because that's the thing. There's some things I can look back and just say with certainty, like this is what happened. But then there's a bunch of other things that I look back and I'm like, it could have been this or that. They're both equally, they both make sense equally, you know, like, so which one was it? And I'll never really have an answer for that. But you don't necessarily need an answer for you to kind of for you to improve, for you to kind of like, you know, do better. So that's a blessing that, you know, you can kind of like, you know, change regardless of what's happening, because, you know, changing is not only important, it is vital for you know, you have to change for you to go through life, because, you know, like you get older, new challenges come, like new insecurities appear, and you have to kind of find your way, you know, figure out like how do I make things work, because that is, you know, something that yeah, that's pretty much where I'm at. You know, like I wanna, you know, I want things to work out for me, and I want, you know, like I don't necessarily need the answer right away, but I need at least to have tools that will help me get closer to an answer. And also, like sometimes, like these questions, they don't really have answers. You know, what's important is kind of like the prompt. You know, like what it is making you think, what it's making you see. You know, what is kind of like how it's, you know, affecting you, because, you know, like you might not never really find the answer, but you can for sure. I don't know, like you can like learn something. You can, you know, and like learning that you know, with you dealing better with things. So that's kind of like my standing. That sometimes it's okay for you not to find the answer, because it's yeah, the answer is not always like the most important thing, because also like the answer doesn't necessarily solve your problems. It doesn't necessarily fix whatever situation you want fixed. It's just like half, like the battle. I mean, which is already pretty good. It's good to know like what's wrong, but just knowing what's wrong is not going to fix anything. Thinking, for example, me being bipolar, having ADHD, and how like that diagnosis for both of those was groundbreaking. Was it completely changed the way that I look at my life, how I look at the past, and because of those diagnoses, a lot of like negative feelings that I had, and a lot of like negative connotations that certain things had taken for me, like I was able to reverse that and to go back to like, no, this happened, because I think like when it comes to like my ADHD, like I try to look at more at, like the positives, because like your brain works differently. So I'm going to kind of like embrace that this is who I am, and I'm gonna come up with strategies to help me along the way, because I'm not medicated for ADHD. I can't be, because I'm bipolar, so like medication, vitamins, they're no go for me. But so just know it's important, because it can kind of like trace a path for you, but you still have to walk that path, so, and that's hard, particularly because of habit, because of trauma. Trauma really gets you going, and like that is for me one of like the most relevant things when I'm kind of like looking at myself at the present or in the past. Like, why did I persist on this for so long? Why did I kind of like not kind of like change the way that I was behaving, the way that I was doing it? The answer is trauma. I was traumatized. I needed to kind of like destigmatize the trauma, process it, so I could continue to live my life in as healthy a way as it possibly possibly can be. But yeah, so like that feeling, that alienation that I experienced, I don't know, it feels like it means something, like because I had a memory, and I was like, oh, there's something here. I have to be, like, I'm not saying that everything like has to be explored, but it is helpful, particularly when a memory from something that you from so long ago that you didn't really have, but like came back to you, like that is the sign that you should probably do something about it. So yeah, but I feel like when I look at it, I'm like, what, the whole thing, because now I'm thinking, was that when that was 6th grade? I think it was sixth grade, but like if you told me it was 5th or 7th, I would be like, yeah, that also that checks out, because, but I think it was before, because I was still yeah, it was like 6, because I was still developing. Oh, but maybe it could have been 7th. Like we might have taken some pictures at the time. I can go back and look, and maybe I'll see the date. But regardless of when it happened, I think it is showing kind of like this disconnect that I have felt with people my whole life. I have always been like very outgoing. I wasn't so much after 13 to like 20 something, but 13 to 23, 20. Like I made efforts before. Like I thought that I was open. I was not. Once again, trauma. But it is something that is kind of like relevant. To me to understand myself, because I was very outgoing, like very much here and there. But it was at the beginning of me feeling kind of like isolated. It would be great for me to know when this happened, because I think that it happened before, because like if it had happened after that, I stopped going like to socializing with like that group of friends. So there's that. But the point is that I think at so many different points felt this kind of like this feeling, like like this loss. And I think that there's something there that I should probably that I still haven't fully understood about myself. But when I look at everything, like it made sense, like after the trauma. So I feel like the whole situation just made everything worse, because on top of like me not feeling like I was a part of like my surroundings, I started to not trust people. So that didn't help. That was that was very counterproductive. But I mean, I don't want to look at things as being productive and counterproductive, particularly when I'm thinking about myself as a teenager dealing with trauma. But like that feeling, that lostness, I think I kept feeling it. But like that's like the first time it made me cry, but like the second time, like I think like each new time, like I started crying less. So I was just like, I was feeling things, but I wasn't crying anymore. But yeah, it was a very intense feeling. And I think I felt really alone. As I said, I think that there was like this disconnect between what was happening in myself. I think that I feel like I didn't belong. Did I feel like I couldn't, that I didn't feel free. That, and I will say that, like, this is something that I said that my experiences with those classmates was mostly positive, and that is true. But in fourth grade, we had, like, some things that happened, just like personal, interpersonal, shit that going on between kids. But it did make me feel alone. I remember another time that I felt alone, and it was fourth grade. It was a whole situation that I don't know if I've already explained, but it was, we were having like our computer lab class, and like there was an organization, of like people, kind of like the way people organize themselves, and I ended up being left alone. And it's interesting because like that kind of like changed the way I approach people. It was something so small, but it did change. Basically, I felt, as I said, I felt alone. I felt not only like, I am alone right now. I felt like, like I was lonely, I guess. And after that situation, I think that even before that situation, I remember this one time in third grade, because like the school was at a place, and then the school was associated with a church, so the campus was like kind of like near the church, and they had like this very large area that they used for parking lots, and they also had a building, like that's pretty much where we did our PE class. And I would, when I was there, I would kind of like sit alone, like by myself, because I think I think I was scared of like just being rejected, it's like that's something. So it just tells me that this is kind of like a recurring feeling. So I was probably scared that that was going to happen, and then it happened, in fourth grade. And after fourth grade, like everything went back to normal, but I feel like I could no longer trust people, which is kind of crazy, because what does that mean for like a 10-year-old? But like now that I think about it, I'm like, yeah, I kind of like created this barrier between me and other people. Like I was here, and even if we were being kind of like close, we're physically close and we are sharing things, I still wasn't completely sharing myself, and I think it's also around like that time that I had my first big aspiration, like job wise and career wise, academically wise, and like that changed me as well, because I think instead of like processing my emotions, I started projecting onto that, like this is going to be my future. Once I get to this point, like everything had been worth it, I'm gonna prove to everybody that like I had it in me, I'm gonna prove everybody wrong, all those things. And it was kind of like an interesting reflection there, because it started there when I was 11, so I think it was already happening. So I think that got in the way of me living my life, because instead of like thinking about what I'm gonna do, what we could do and all that, I started kind of like fantasizing. It's not all fantasizing was bad. I started writing, like my novel, like the world that I'm currently writing my novels in, like I started developing it when I was 13. So like that was a fantasy that I had. So there was, I'm glad with like everything that got me writing, because I had so many ideas, so many things I wanted to do, and basically like that was a good one. It was a good example. So no, I don't regret fully kind of like alienating myself from my surroundings. But like I think that because that became my habit, it's really hard right now for me to kind of like get detached from like those fantasies. Like there's always something that I'm fantasizing about, and as I said before, if it is right into my writing, like that's great, but most of the time it is not, and I want to do something about it. Like something has to be done. I don't know what, because I feel like I've already tried everything, but the important thing is for me not to give up. Like I think as long as I keep this mentality that there is something to be done, even if I cannot think of it right now. And also sometimes I'm just thinking about getting by, so I'm going to focus on today, and I'm going to try and make sure my head is grounded today, that I'm anchored, and that's going to be my challenge for today. I'm not thinking about tomorrow or the day after. Tomorrow I'm gonna get concerned with like tomorrow and doing things. But yeah, so I feel like even though I would say I don't think that I didn't fit in. I think I did just fine, but I feel like I felt like I didn't, and this led to a lot of, because there's a lot of like stuff that happened in my head, because I think saying that I don't fit in, like a logical conclusion you could get is that then certainly I was getting rebellious, but I was not, at least not against like my parents or my school or anything, like that. Okay, I'm gonna let the flight live. But yeah, so I forgot what I was saying. Damn it. But yeah, so I was talking about not fitting in, and it's kind of like this. It's not that I felt like that I was like so different, or special or anything. I felt more like isolated, and even when I was engaging, fully with people around me, I still felt, a disconnect. And this is not new, I think, but I don't think I ever properly talked about it. And as I said, like, I need to talk about this because I feel like a lot of development can be gained from me, acknowledging this. And yeah, and to this day, like, I don't know, I feel like when I was younger, I felt that, it's not that there wasn't anything for anyone for me, but I just felt like I haven't really found my people. I came close to feeling that, in 2018, when I was taking my mentoring course, and the people there, like, that nothing ever happened because I was still like in this mindset of like not really wanting people, even though I said I was open, I wasn't really. Also, it's kind of crazy because it was December 2017 that I kind of like started having this, open approach, and it's going to be what, like 9 years this year that I've been doing this. No, not 9, 8. Right? No, 17, so 25, yeah, 9 years. No, 8 years. It's going to be 9. Okay, that was embarrassing. But look how long it takes. It just takes a long while for things to process here sometimes. Like, I'm very stubborn and I'm very vindictive too. So usually, like, there's a struggle there because I have to let things go and I don't want to let them go. And getting myself to kind of like agree with what's also in my best interest is hard because I can objectively see that this is not a good path for me. But like, I still am feeling those feelings, and I feel like this disconnect between like your thinking and your feeling is not new. It's pretty normal, but there's definitely a better synergy to be had regarding this. Like, I definitely think that there is something I can do that will make things flow better because like what I don't want to suppress my feelings. I want to feel them and I want to move past them. Like, I want to I want to feel them, process them, and then boom, they can leave. And I don't know how to do that with a lot of different things. As I said, but like, even then, me being stubborn and more vindictive, it's one of those, maybe vindictive is a strong word. I'll go with petty, being kind of like stubborn and petty. It is, I made a lot of progress, regardless. So, it shows me that there is still like more progress that I can make. And also, like, ultimately, like, fantasies there about things that you feel you're lacking. So the problem is, like, some things I'm lacking them in my life, but like there's no going to change. For example, things that require me having more money, like, that is like not really happening. I'm doing my best, but like, the growth is not going to be like 100%, and not at once. So there's a whole other challenge. So yeah, there are things that I'm thinking about, but like, they're not doable. But even then, those things I can kind of like break them down one way or another, so I can have at least like a partial something, a little part of it. But yeah, but like, that is not the fucking fly, man. Lost my train of thought. Oh, god damn it. But there are other things that like, they're totally doable in my life. Like, there is 100% chance that I can do that. So for example, I want more interactions with people. I can interact more, like, I recently I reached out to an old friend, and because of her I've been introduced to, besides going out with her, I've been introduced to more things. So it's something that I can do and something that I'm doing, and that is pretty much what I think I need. I need to have more of like these things because sometimes, like, when you're fantasizing about them, like, because sometimes you're fantasizing about something, but that is not in itself. You don't need that specific scenario to take place. You have to break it down and realize, like, oh, okay, I just want to feel more confident, for example. So there are things that I can do. They're within my power to make me feel more comfortable and more confident. So let me just do that, because usually, like, reality is pretty much the thing that tempers fantasies. So if you're living your life, if you're living outside of your head, you certainly are going to, you're going to kind of like, that it's kind of like the mind's a muscle, right? And your mind can also think of it as a muscle. Not a muscle, is an organ, whatever. But you exercise organs. Today is rough for me. But it's kind of like, you know, you have this muscle tissue and basically you exercise it. So like if I train myself to, instead of being focused on, you know, like this fantastical scenario, I can focus, you know, something that will give me the same, you know, the outcome will be the same in terms of like what I'll be feeling, you know, and how I will be. So yeah, so I just need to kind of like exercise a little bit, you know. I have to train myself, you know, to get to this point, to get to the point where I'm doing better. And life is going to fall apart. This is not going to fall apart. Life is going to be great. I'm excited about the future. And yeah, so I want to meditate a little bit more on like that feeling that I had at that age. And you know, probably my next video is going to be me talking about it again, because it was just so, it's kind of crazy for me to think about how I was feeling when I was, what, 6th grade. I was like 12. Yeah, like that's kind of crazy, you know. And then I feel, well, this actually is getting me to think about this from a religious perspective, because I grew up, you know, religious, and I officially left religion in 2019, December 2019. It was basically 2020. But even like before that, like there were years of me kind of like going back and forth with myself about what I believed in, what I didn't, and all that. And I feel like this is the type of feeling that I'm like, okay, did I feel, was that the beginning of what made me feel kind of like, you know, become a godless person? Because I remember, you know, it was also 6th grade, a class that I had. It was a class we were learning about, you know, how the universe came to be. And I remember feeling like, oh, okay, God does not have to exist in this scenario. Like, and I do know that it's kind of like weird, because I didn't really have any interaction with people, or didn't really read anything, you know. And the transition for me, you know, becoming an atheist was very straightforward. It was more like I was thinking about this, and like, this doesn't make sense to me. You know, I think that to this day, like, even if I were to kind of like, I don't know, find God or higher power or whatever, there are things that I wouldn't believe, and because I already don't believe in them now, you know, like miracles and things that happen. I'm like, that is, you know, that could be flowery writing, you know. That's how people wrote down. But I do remember when I first had that thought, I felt very much like a heretic, so I pushed it away, but it kept coming back. But you know, ouch, I hit my head with, you know, the ring part of my hand. But yeah, so I kind of like am doing what makes sense to me. And as I said, like, you know, as long as you're not harming yourself or the people, you know, you do you, and this fucking fly, you know, you do you. But this is pretty much what makes sense, you know, to me. You know, what makes sense is that these things, they don't make sense. But it was, as I said, like a long journey, because like so I was 12, so that was, you know, 2010. And then it took me a decade from like that initial point for me to get to, okay. And as I said, like I didn't talk to anybody. To this day, like I still have a lot of relations, you know, and interactions with like religion, because as I said, like it doesn't, you know, I've been able to deal with my trauma, so it doesn't bother me anymore. You know, it's not really something that is kind of like keeping me awake at night. So I'm still like involved, but I don't know, like, and it's one of those things that because I feel, because I'm still there, sometimes I think people they kind of like think that I might be having a change of heart. You know, I can tell this by some of the comments they're made, and like, no, the more I get involved with religion, and you know, I'm getting reacquainted now, you could say, the more sure I am of what I think. You know, I feel like listening to certain things so often is just really, it's just like, yeah, like the more I listen to this, the less I believe that this is actually something that could have happened. But that's not the point. But I was kind of like thinking, as I said, of like when I was, you know, there one moment where I felt completely alone. I felt very desolate. I think it's a word I haven't really used yet. But it's all for the better. You know, like things in my life have improved with time, and as I figure out who I am, what I stand for, and all of that. Some things that are very easy, like very straightforward. You know, like I'm very pro some things and against others. and I don't really feel a responsibility of saying what, because I think of political things, and I have, because it's kind of like a double-edged sword. Because on one hand, I think that if you're a public figure, you should make your stances kind of clear, even because, particularly, you talk a lot about art. Like, art is inherently political. Like, what the fuck do you mean? But that's not, that's not the point of this video. But I'm just like a nobody here, so I don't have to talk about it, because I try to avoid talking about it as much as I possibly can. I do my research, so I can vote and I can, be on top of things, like know what's happening. But apart from that, like, I'm just living a very productive era of my life where I'm just ignoring that, because ultimately, like, like, the power is in the collective. Like, you as an individual, like, that's not gonna make a difference. And yeah, so I honestly, I think like that's pretty much half of my argument, that there's no point. But the truth is more like, yeah, it also, it has no point, but it's also that I'm it's like I don't wanna, and that is as much as an excuse that I can give, kind of accepting that maybe I'm a hypocrite, but I'm doing what's best, for me. And my life has been doing pretty well since I started prioritizing my mental health. And when I say my mental health, it's not that I wasn't thinking about myself before, because I was. It's just that, as I said, petty and stubborn. So I was kind of like dying on these hills that I did not have to die on, and that was kind of like, so yeah, I stopped thinking about my self-centeredness, and now it's more about myself, my well-being. So that made a huge difference for me. But yeah, so I had this moment, and I'll be thinking about it. Honestly, it's a good thing that I'm thinking about this moment, because I feel like I want to write about it. So I'm gonna finish here and I'm gonna go write a little bit about like this feeling that I had, because writing is the cure for almost everything in my life. But yeah, so anyways, bye.